The call came in at 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. Nothing unusual about that. Domestic disturbances don't keep regular hours. But when I arrived at 1247 Elm Street, the front door was wide open, rain streaming across the hardwood floors, and Sarah Chin was sitting in her kitchen chair, staring at her laptop screen with tears streaming down her face. "He's been watching me," she whispered without looking up. "For months. Maybe years." On her screen was a folder titled Sarah's Life, containing over 3,000 photos and videos. Sarah at the grocery store. Sarah walking her dog. Sarah through her bedroom window, sleeping. The timestamp on the oldest file showed a date from 2 years ago. "I'm Detective Maria Santos, 15 years on the force, and I thought I'd seen everything. I was wrong." Sarah's ex-boyfriend, Derek Morrison, seemed like the obvious suspect. Classic stalking case. But when we brought him in, he was genuinely confused. His alibi checked out for most of the surveillance dates. He'd been deployed overseas with the National Guard for 8 months of the time frame. The photos kept coming even while he was in Afghanistan. "Look at the metadata," Sarah insisted when I visited her the next day. She'd barely slept, jumping at every sound. "The photos aren't just taken from outside. Some are from inside my house. And look at this." She clicked on a video file dated 3 weeks ago. The footage showed Sarah's living room, but the angle was wrong, too high, too centered. Like it was taken from a hidden camera mounted in the ceiling fan. "I've lived here for 5 years," she said. "I would have noticed someone installing cameras." That's when I realized we weren't dealing with a typical stalking case. I spent the afternoon going through Sarah's rental history. The house on Elm Street had been owned by the same property management company for a decade. Hartwell Properties. When I called their office, a cheerful receptionist told me that Mr. Hartwell handled all special installations personally. "Special installations?" I asked. "Oh, you know, security systems, smart home features. He's very hands-on with his properties." Robert Hartwell was 63, owned 47 rental properties across the city, and had no criminal record. He met me at his office wearing a crisp suit and concerned expression. "Of course I want to help," he said, shaking my hand. "Sarah's been such a good tenant. This stalking situation must be terrifying for her." I watched his face carefully. "The photos appear to be taken from inside her house." He frowned thoughtfully. "Well, we do install basic security systems in some units. Smoke detectors with cameras, things like that. For insurance purposes. It's all disclosed in the lease agreement." But when I checked Sarah's lease, there was no mention of internal cameras. "That's odd," Hartwell said, scrolling through his tablet. "Let me check our files." The next day, Sarah called me, hysterical. "The files are gone. All of them. The entire folder just disappeared from my computer." I drove to her house immediately. She was right. The laptop showed no trace of the Sarah's Life folder. No deleted files in the trash. No evidence it had ever existed. But I'd taken photos of the screen with my phone the day before. The evidence was still there, just not where we'd found it. "Someone accessed my computer remotely," Sarah said, "while I was sleeping. I woke up and the screen was on, showing my desktop." That evening, I sat in my car outside Hartwell Properties, thinking. Remote access to delete files. Professional-grade surveillance equipment. A property manager with access to dozens of homes. The pieces were forming a picture I didn't want to see. I called my tech guy, Danny, and asked him to run a deeper check on Hartwell's digital footprint. What he found made my blood run cold. "He's got subscriptions to some serious surveillance software," Danny told me over the phone. "Not the kind of stuff you use for home security. This is corporate-level monitoring. Remote access capabilities, cloud storage, encrypted file transfers. And get this, his internet usage shows massive data uploads every night between 2 and 4 a.m. Uploads to where? That's the thing. The data's going to multiple encrypted servers. Could be backing up surveillance footage, could be something else." I thought about Sarah's tearful face, the violation in her eyes. How many other tenants had that same look? How many others were being watched, recorded, their most private moments catalogued by a man they trusted with their homes? The next morning, I got a warrant to search Hartwell's office. What we found in his back room changed everything. 4 computer monitors showing live feeds from different houses. Not security cameras, intimate angles. Bedrooms, bathrooms, private spaces. A filing cabinet full of USB drives labeled with addresses. And a ledger, handwritten, with names, addresses, and what looked like payment amounts. Sarah's name was there, but so were 36 others. But it was the other ledger that made me understand we'd stumbled into something much worse than a landlord with boundary issues. This one had different names, names I didn't recognize, with much larger payment amounts, and locations that weren't residential addresses. They were hotels, businesses, government buildings. When I reached for my radio to call for backup, Hartwell appeared in the doorway behind me. "Detective Santos," he said calmly. "I was hoping we could talk." I spun around, hand moving to my weapon, but he was holding up his empty hands. "You don't understand what you're looking at," he continued. "This isn't what you think." "Really?" "Because it looks like you've been running a surveillance operation on your tenants." He smiled sadly. "My tenants, yes. But also city council members, judges, federal prosecutors. People who need to be watched. People who make decisions that affect all of us." My radio crackled. "Santos, you there? We've got reports of suspicious activity at your location." I reached for it, but Hartwell spoke again. "Detective, how do you think I've avoided criminal charges for 15 years? How do you think I know exactly which properties to buy, which cases to stay away from, which officers are trustworthy?" The monitors behind him showed feeds from what looked like police locker rooms, courtrooms, private offices. "You've been recording cops. I've been protecting myself. And providing a service to people who pay very well for information. Your captain's gambling problem, for instance. Or Judge Morrison's relationship with that prosecutor from the DA's office." My hand froze on the radio. Judge Morrison. Derek Morrison's father. "That's right," Hartwell said, reading my expression. "Sarah's ex-boyfriend. His father has been very helpful in making certain legal problems disappear. But Sarah started asking too many questions, getting too close to figuring out how I operate. We needed her to focus on Derek, not on the real source of her problems." The room felt smaller suddenly. "The photos were planted. The photos were real. I've been watching Sarah for 2 years. But we made sure she'd blame Derek first. Bought us time to clean up and relocate the operation." I keyed my radio. "This is Santos. I need immediate backup at Hartwell Properties." Static. "This is Santos, requesting backup." "Anyone copy?" Nothing. Hartwell pulled out his phone and showed me the screen. It was displaying a live feed from the police station's communication room. I could see the dispatcher at her desk, but she wasn't responding to radio calls. She was reading a book. "Emergency services have been temporarily redirected," he said. "Another useful contact." What I discovered next made me question everything I thought I knew about how deep this surveillance network went. The filing cabinets contained more than just USB drives. There were contracts, official documents, payment records showing monthly transfers from accounts registered to law enforcement agencies, court systems, and city government offices. This wasn't just a landlord spying on tenants. This was a professional intelligence operation, and my own department was paying for it. I found my name in the ledger. According to the records, I'd been under surveillance for 6 months. Every case I'd worked, every conversation I'd had, every private moment in my own home, recorded, catalogued, and sold to whoever wanted information about Detective Maria Santos. "Your divorce proceedings were particularly valuable," Hartwell said, watching me read. "Your ex-husband's attorney paid handsomely for details about your daily routine, your emotional state, your financial situation." The ground felt unstable under my feet. My divorce had been brutal, but I'd never understood how my ex had always seemed one step ahead, how his lawyer knew details about my life that I'd never shared with anyone. How many people know? I asked. About you specifically? Just the clients who purchased your information. But detective, you're missing the bigger picture here. He gestured to the monitors. This system has been running for 15 years. Thousands of people recorded. Judges, prosecutors, police officers, city officials, business owners, journalists. Anyone who makes decisions that might affect certain interests. What interests? People who pay for influence. Who need to know what's going to happen before it happens. Who want insurance policies on the people in power. I stared at the screen showing live feeds from locations across the city. How is this even possible? It's remarkably easy when you control the infrastructure. Property management, security system installation, internet service providers, phone companies. A little money here, a little blackmail there, and suddenly you have access to everything. The truth behind everything was so much worse than I could have imagined. The files showed that cases had been thrown out because prosecutors were being blackmailed. Judges had ruled in favor of defendants whose lawyers had compromising footage of the judges themselves. Police investigations had been derailed because the suspects had dirt on the investigating officers. My own cases were there. 3 investigations that had mysteriously stalled out, evidence that had gone missing, witnesses who had suddenly become unreliable. All cases involving people who were also in Hartwell's client database. You've been manipulating the justice system for 15 years. I've been providing a service. Information is power, detective. And power needs to be distributed fairly. This isn't fair. This is control. Same thing, really? I looked at the monitors again, at all those private spaces being watched without consent, all those lives being commodified for profit and influence. Sarah was just one victim in a system designed to turn privacy into currency. But I was a victim too. And so was everyone else who'd been recorded, catalogued, and sold. What happens now? I asked. Hartwell smiled. Now you have a choice. You can try to arrest me, try to shut this down, and watch your career disappear along with your credibility. We have footage of you that would end your marriage, your job, and probably your freedom. Or you can walk away, forget what you've seen, and continue your life as it was. And Sarah? Sarah will be fine as long as she stops asking questions. I thought about all the cases that would never see justice, all the victims who would never know why their lives had been violated, all the corruption that would continue to poison the system I'd sworn to protect. The final piece of the puzzle changed everything, and there was no going back. Hidden in the last filing cabinet was a folder marked recruitment. It contained background checks, financial records, and psychological profiles on dozens of police officers, including me. We weren't just being surveilled. We were being evaluated. The folder showed a systematic process: identify officers with financial problems, personal issues, or career ambitions. Record their private lives. Then present them with the same choice Hartwell was offering me now: join the operation or have their lives destroyed. Half the names in the folder had check marks next to them. I recognized every single one. Officers I worked with every day. People I trusted. People who'd been feeding information to Hartwell for years while I investigated cases they already knew the outcomes of. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number with a video attachment. The video showed me in my apartment last night, reading through Sarah's case files, making notes about the investigation. The timestamp showed it was recorded just 12 hours ago. Another text. Your choice, detective. Join us, or join the victims. I looked at Hartwell, at the monitors, at all the evidence of a system designed to turn trust into a weapon. That's when I realized this was never about Sarah Chen at all. Sarah was the bait. The whole case was designed to bring me here, to this moment, to force me into the same impossible choice they'd given to dozens of others. They'd been watching me for months, waiting for the right case, the right emotional trigger to make me dig deeper than I should have. Sarah's tears, her violation, her trust in me, it was all part of the recruitment process. You knew I'd keep investigating, I said. We knew you'd care. That's what makes you valuable. The rain outside was getting heavier, drumming against the windows like fingers tapping impatiently. In the distance, I could hear sirens, but they were moving away from us, not toward us. Hartwell checked his phone. Your backup request was rerouted to a false alarm across town. They'll be busy for hours. I had seconds to decide, and my choice would determine everything. I could try to arrest Hartwell, knowing that dozens of compromised officers would make sure the case disappeared and my life would be destroyed in the process. I could walk away and let Sarah and thousands of others continue to be violated while corruption ate away at everything I'd dedicated my life to protecting. Or I could pretend to join them and try to find another way. I reached for my handcuffs, then stopped. On one of the monitors, I could see Sarah in her kitchen, still sitting at her laptop, still crying. But this time, I noticed something I'd missed before. She was looking directly at the camera. And she was smiling. The screen flickered, and I saw the truth in her eyes just as the lights went out. I've been a K-9 officer for 12 years, and I thought I knew everything there was to know about my partner. Rex is a 4-year-old German Shepherd with a nose that can detect narcotics from 50 yards away and a success rate that made our unit the envy of 3 surrounding departments. What I discovered 3 weeks after Detective Santos went missing still makes me question everything I thought I understood about police work. It started on a Tuesday morning when Sergeant Williams called me into his office with what he described as a special assignment. Nothing unusual there. K-9 units get pulled for everything from school demonstrations to celebrity security details. But when he handed me an address on Maple Street and told me to do a routine sweep, without backup, something felt off. No warrant? I asked, checking the paperwork twice. Don't need one. Property owner requested the sweep. Thinks there might be drug activity in the area, wants us to check it out as a public service. The address was 2847 Maple Street, a modest 2-story house in a quiet residential neighborhood. Nothing about it screamed drug operation. Well-maintained lawn, fresh paint, newspapers stacked neatly on the porch. But Rex started alerting before we even got out of the patrol car. His behavior was textbook, ears forward, body tense, focused stare at the house. But here's what bothered me. Rex's alerts are usually for active substances. Fresh drugs, recently used equipment, active cooking operations. This felt different. More intense, like he was picking up something that had been there for a long time. I walked him around the perimeter, standard procedure. Rex hit on 3 different spots: the front door, a basement window, and the electrical meter on the side of the house. But when I called it in, Williams told me to file a negative report. No evidence of drug activity, he said over the radio. Move on to the next location. The next location was 1523 Oak Avenue. Same story, property owner request, no warrant needed, Rex alerted immediately. This time at the garage door, a second-floor window, and strangely, the mailbox. Again, Williams told me to report negative findings. By the 4th house that week, I knew something was seriously wrong. Rex had alerted to 7 different properties, all in different neighborhoods, all with property owner requests for drug sweeps. But every single report I filed said we found nothing. And every single property had one thing in common. They were all rental properties managed by the same company I'd seen in Detective Santos's notes before she disappeared. Hartwell Properties. That night, I went home and did something I'd never done in 12 years of police work. I started keeping my own records. Not the official reports that Williams reviewed, but detailed notes about Rex's behavior, the specific locations of his alerts, and the addresses we'd been sent to investigate. What I discovered over the next week changed everything I thought I knew about how K-9 units operate. Rex wasn't just alerting to drugs. He was alerting to electronic equipment. See, most people don't know that drug detection dogs can be trained to identify more than just narcotics. The same scent training that helps them find cocaine residue can be adapted to detect specific chemicals used in electronics manufacturing. Lithium batteries, certain plastics, metal alloys. With the right training, a dog like Rex could identify surveillance equipment just as easily as a bag of heroin. But I'd never trained Rex to detect electronics. Someone else had. I started testing him at home, using my old cell phone, my laptop, even the smoke detector in my kitchen. Rex showed no interest in any of them. But when I brought him to the electronics store at the mall, he went crazy in the security camera section. Not the regular consumer cameras, the professional-grade surveillance equipment locked behind the counter. That's when I realized Rex had been receiving additional training sessions that weren't in his official records. I checked the department's K-9 training logs going back 6 months. According to the paperwork, Rex had been attending regular narcotics certification sessions twice a month. But when I cross-referenced the dates with my own schedule, I found something disturbing. Rex had been signed out for training on days when I was off duty, sessions I'd never been informed about. Someone had been borrowing my dog to train him for surveillance detection, then using that training to identify properties with hidden cameras and listening devices. The question was, were they finding the equipment to remove it, or to install more of it? I decided to find out by following Rex's alerts more closely. Instead of just noting where he alerted, I started documenting what happened to those properties afterward. The pattern that emerged made my blood run cold. Every house Rex had identified was broken into within 2 weeks of our sweep. Not traditional break-ins, no broken windows, no forced doors, no missing valuables. Professional entries. The kind where someone with keys and alarm codes could get in and out without leaving obvious traces. But residents reported strange things afterward. Internet connections running slower. New sounds in the walls. Smoke detectors that seemed to have been moved slightly. Smart home devices that seemed to activate on their own. Rex wasn't helping us find surveillance equipment. He was helping someone install it. The worst part was realizing how long this had been going on. I pulled Rex's training records going back 2 years. The entire time Detective Santos had been investigating the Hartwell surveillance network. Rex had been used to identify dozens of properties, and according to my research, every single one had been compromised within weeks of our visits. But the night I confronted Sergeant Williams about the unauthorized training sessions, I discovered the operation was even more sophisticated than I'd imagined. "You're asking a lot of questions, Officer Martinez," Williams said when I showed him my documentation. "Questions that could get you in trouble. Rex is my partner. I have a right to know what training he's receiving." Williams smiled in a way that made my skin crawl. "Rex isn't just your partner anymore. He's a valuable asset to several different operations." He pulled out a tablet and showed me surveillance footage of Rex during one of his training sessions. But it wasn't narcotics training. Rex was being taught to identify specific electronic signatures, not just any surveillance equipment, but particular brands and models. "Your dog has been helping us locate outdated surveillance systems so we can upgrade them," Williams explained. "Old cameras that record locally instead of uploading to secure servers. Listening devices that store data instead of transmitting it in real time. Equipment that could be used against us instead of for us. Us? The people who keep this city running smoothly. The people who make sure dangerous information doesn't fall into the wrong hands." I stared at the tablet screen, watching Rex obediently alerting to different pieces of equipment, while trainers I didn't recognize rewarded him with treats. "You've been using my dog to help expand a surveillance network. We've been using your dog to help protect law enforcement operations. Do you know how many officers have been killed because criminals knew they were coming? How many cases have been compromised because the wrong people had access to police communications?" The footage showed Rex in different houses, different buildings. Not just residential properties, police stations, courthouses, government offices. Places where Rex's alerts had identified locations for security upgrades. "You've been surveilling cops. We've been protecting cops. There's a difference." Williams showed me more footage, Rex alerting in the police station's locker room, the evidence storage facility, the captain's office. Every location where officers might discuss sensitive cases or store confidential information. How many departments know about this? I asked. The ones that matter. The ones that want to stay ahead of criminals who use technology against us. But what I saw next made me realize the scope of what Rex had unknowingly helped create. The tablet showed a live feed from inside Detective Santos's apartment. The same apartment where she'd been investigating the Hartwell surveillance network before she disappeared. Rex had been inside that apartment 3 months ago for what I'd been told was a wellness check, after Santos missed a shift. Rex had identified every location where Santos had hidden her investigation materials. And those locations had been bugged within hours of our visit. "Where is Detective Santos?" I asked. Williams's expression didn't change. Detective Santos was reassigned to a federal task force. Very classified work. But I knew better. I'd seen Santos's investigation notes before she disappeared. She'd been getting close to exposing the surveillance network, and Rex had been used to help destroy her evidence. "You used my dog to set up a fellow officer. We used your dog to protect ongoing operations from someone who didn't understand the bigger picture." Williams turned off the tablet and leaned back in his chair. "Officer Martinez, you have a choice to make. You can continue to be part of the solution, or you can become part of the problem. What kind of choice is that? The kind where you keep doing your job, following orders, and trusting that your superiors know what's best for everyone involved. Or the kind where you start asking questions that could get you transferred to a much less desirable assignment." I thought about Rex, about all the properties he'd helped compromise, all the people whose privacy had been violated because of his training. I thought about Detective Santos, wherever she was, and whether she was safe. What happens if I refuse to participate? Williams smiled again. "Well, K9 units are expensive to maintain. Budget cuts are always possible. Rex might need to be reassigned to a handler who's more cooperative." The threat was clear. Refuse to participate, and Rex would be taken away and used by someone else for the same operations. At least if I stayed involved, I could try to limit the damage. But what Williams said next changed everything. "Besides, we have footage of you in some very compromising situations, Officer Martinez. Rex alerting to your own house, for instance. Finding some very interesting substances in your personal effects. He showed me surveillance footage of my own home, with Rex appearing to alert to my bedroom closet. But I knew that alert was fake. Rex had never shown any interest in my closet, and I'd never kept anything illegal in my house." "Planted evidence?" I asked. "Evidence of poor judgment. A K9 officer whose own dog alerts to drugs in his personal residence. That's the kind of scandal that ends careers and leads to criminal investigations." I realized they'd been preparing this leverage for months, documenting fake alerts that could be used to destroy my credibility if I became a problem. The rain started hitting the windows of Williams's office, matching the storm that was brewing in my mind. I thought about all the innocent people Rex had helped violate, all the police officers who were being surveilled by their own department, all the cases that had been compromised by this network. But I also thought about Rex, sitting in his kennel, tail wagging, trusting me to protect him from people who would use his training for purposes he could never understand. That's when I made a decision that would either save us both or destroy us. "I need to think about this," I told Williams. "You have 24 hours," he replied. "After that, we'll assume you've chosen to be part of the problem." I left his office knowing that I had less than a day to figure out how to expose a surveillance network that had infiltrated multiple police departments, compromised dozens of cases, and potentially caused the disappearance of at least one detective. And I had to do it without getting Rex hurt in the process. But what I didn't know was that Rex had been trained for one more type of detection that would change everything. Something Williams hadn't told me about, something that would lead me to Detective Santos and reveal the true scope of what we were up against. Have you ever noticed your pets acting strangely around certain people or places? Do you think animals can sense things about humans that we miss? What would you do if you discovered your trusted companion was being used against people you'd sworn to protect? I'm Detective Jake Morrison, And what I'm about to tell you happened 3 weeks after Officer Martinez discovered his K-9 partner had been compromised. My partner, Detective Lisa Chang, and I thought we were investigating a simple missing persons case. What we uncovered instead was the true scope of the surveillance network that had already claimed Detective Santos and nearly destroyed Martinez's career. It started when we got a call about a missing federal prosecutor. Amanda Wells, 34 years old, hadn't shown up for work in 2 days. Her office said she'd been working on a major corruption case involving local law enforcement, and they were concerned for her safety. When Chang and I arrived at Wells's apartment, the landlord was already there with a key. "She's always so punctual," he said, unlocking the door. "Never missed rent, never caused trouble." I knew something was wrong. The apartment looked normal at first glance. No signs of struggle, no obvious evidence of foul play. But Chang noticed something I missed. Tiny holes drilled in the walls near electrical outlets, so small you'd only see them if you knew what to look for. "Jake, look at this," she said, pointing to a hole about the size of a pencil tip near the kitchen outlet. "This wasn't here when the apartment was built." We found 12 more holes throughout the apartment, each one positioned to provide optimal surveillance coverage. Someone had been watching Amanda Wells for months, maybe years. But what we discovered in her home office changed everything. Wells had been investigating the same surveillance network that Detective Santos had stumbled onto. Her files contained detailed records of property ownership, rental agreements, and financial transactions, all linked to Hartwell Properties. But Wells had gone deeper than Santos ever did. She traced the money. The surveillance operation wasn't just about local corruption. It was being funded by federal contracts. Homeland Security grants, anti-terrorism funding, border security money, millions of dollars that were supposed to be used for national security were being funneled into domestic surveillance operations. "This is way bigger than we thought," Chang said, reading through Wells's notes. She was building a RICO case against an entire network of law enforcement officials. But Wells had made copies of everything, and those copies were missing from her apartment. Chang found the hiding spot, a false bottom in Wells's bedroom dresser that had been pried open. Whoever took Wells had also taken her evidence. But they'd missed something crucial. Hidden behind the bathroom mirror was a USB drive containing encrypted files that would expose the entire operation. "We need to get this to Internal Affairs," I said. Chang shook her head. "Jake, look at the names on this list. Half of IA is compromised. We can't trust anyone in the department." She was right. The files showed that the surveillance network had infiltrated every level of law enforcement. Police chiefs, federal agents, prosecutors, judges, anyone who could make problems disappear or ensure cases never went to trial. But what made me realize we were in immediate danger was finding my own father's name in the files. Judge William Morrison, my father, had been taking payments from the surveillance network for 3 years. Every case involving Hartwell Properties or related entities that came before his court had been decided in favor of the network, including the case where Derek Morrison, my cousin, had been falsely accused of stalking Sarah Chin. "Your father's been compromised," Chang said quietly. "They'd been using him to control court decisions." I felt sick. All those times my father had asked me about cases I was working on, all those casual questions about what evidence we'd found or what witnesses we'd interviewed, he'd been reporting back to the surveillance network. "They know we're here," I realized. "If my father's been reporting on my cases, they know we found Wells's apartment and her files." Chang was already moving toward the door. "We need to get out of here. Now." But as we reached the apartment hallway, we heard footsteps on the stairs below us. Multiple sets, moving quickly and trying to be quiet. "Fire escape," Chang whispered. We made it to the roof just as the apartment door burst open below us. Through the skylight, we could see armed figures in tactical gear searching Wells's apartment. But these weren't regular police officers. "Private security," Chang observed, watching them work. "Professional surveillance countermeasures team." They were systematically dismantling every hiding spot in the apartment, using equipment I'd never seen before to detect hidden cameras, listening devices, and data storage. They knew exactly what they were looking for and where to find it. "They've done this before," I said. "A lot." We waited on the roof in the rain for 2 hours, watching them work. When they finally left, they'd removed every trace of surveillance equipment from Wells's apartment. If we hadn't found those files behind the mirror, there would be no evidence that Wells had been investigating anything at all. But Chang had been thinking while we waited. "Jake, if they're this organized, this professional, they're not just reacting to investigations. They're preventing them." "What do you mean?" "Wells disappeared before she could file her case. Santos was transferred before she could expose the surveillance network. Martinez is being blackmailed to keep quiet. They don't just cover up their crimes, they eliminate threats before they become problems." That's when I realized we weren't investigating a missing persons case. We were the next targets for elimination. The drive back to the station was silent, both of us processing what we'd learned. The surveillance network wasn't just watching people, it was actively controlling law enforcement investigations, court decisions, and prosecutorial actions. They had turned the justice system into a tool for protecting their own criminal enterprise. But when we arrived at the station, Sergeant Williams was waiting for us with a friendly smile that made my blood run cold. "Detectives Morrison and Chang," he said. "How did the Wells apartment search go? Find anything interesting?" Chang and I exchanged glances. Williams wasn't assigned to the Wells case. He shouldn't have known we were there. "Routine missing persons investigation," Chang replied carefully. "No obvious signs of foul play." Williams nodded. "That's good to hear. Wells probably just took a few personal days without notifying her office. Federal prosecutors work too hard, you know? Sometimes they just need to get away from it all." But his eyes were cold, calculating. He knew we'd found something. "Why don't you both come to my office?" Williams suggested. "I'd like to hear your report in detail." Chang's hand moved subtly toward her weapon. "Actually, we need to process some evidence first. File our preliminary report." "I insist," Williams said, and suddenly 2 other officers appeared behind us. Officers whose names I'd seen in Wells's files as being part of the surveillance network. We were trapped. What I discovered next made me question everything I thought I knew about how deep this conspiracy went. Williams's office had been soundproofed. Thick padding on the walls, special glass in the windows, equipment designed to prevent electronic surveillance. But it wasn't to keep people from listening in. It was to keep conversations from being recorded by the surveillance network's own equipment. "Detective Morrison," Williams said once the door was closed. "Your father is very concerned about your recent activities." "My father?" Williams showed me his phone. A text message from Judge Morrison. "Jake is getting too close. Recommend immediate intervention. Your father has been keeping us informed about your cases for years," Williams explained. "It's been very helpful. But lately, you've been investigating things that could be harmful to ongoing operations." Chang stepped closer to me. "Jake, they've been using your father to spy on us." "Detective Chang is correct," Williams said. "Judge Morrison has been providing intelligence about which cases might pose problems, which evidence might be damaging, which prosecutors might be getting too aggressive in their investigations." He pulled out a file folder thick with documents. "Your father's gambling debts were quite substantial, Detective Morrison. We helped him resolve those debts in exchange for his cooperation. A very mutually beneficial arrangement." The file contained records of my father's gambling losses, loan shark threats, and payments from the surveillance network. Hundreds of thousands of dollars over 3 years. "But family loyalty only goes so far," Williams continued. "When family members become a threat to the operation, difficult decisions have to be made." "What happened to Wells?" Chang demanded. Williams smiled. "Prosecutor Wells is safe. She's been relocated to a position where she can be more productive. Federal Witness Protection Program. Very classified. She'll be working on cases that don't threaten ongoing operations." "You mean she's been silenced?" "She's been reassigned. Just like Detective Santos was reassigned. Just like Officer Martinez will be reassigned if he continues to ask inconvenient questions about his K-9 partner's training. Williams opened another file folder. This one contained surveillance footage of Chang and me over the past 6 months. At crime scenes, in restaurants, at our homes. They'd been watching us constantly. The question now, Williams said, is whether Detectives Morrison and Chang want to be part of the solution, or if they need to be reassigned as well. Chang's hand was definitely on her weapon now. What kind of solution? The kind where you continue doing excellent police work on cases that don't involve certain sensitive areas. Drug investigations, robbery cases, domestic violence calls, plenty of important work that doesn't interfere with national security operations. National security? I asked. Williams turned to a wall monitor and activated a display showing a map of the city with hundreds of red dots. Each dot represented a surveillance location. Every red dot is a camera, listening device, or monitoring station, he explained. We're watching suspected terrorists, drug dealers, human traffickers, and other threats to public safety. This operation has prevented dozens of attacks and saved countless lives. But I could see that many of the dots were in locations that had nothing to do with terrorism or major crime. Residential neighborhoods, schools, government buildings, police stations. You're watching everyone, Chang said. We're protecting everyone. But sometimes protection requires difficult choices. Williams showed us more surveillance footage. Criminals being arrested before they could commit crimes, terrorist plots being disrupted before they could be executed, drug operations being shut down before they could distribute their products. This surveillance network has made our city safer than it's been in decades, he said. Crime rates are down, conviction rates are up, and threats are neutralized before they can harm innocent people. By violating everyone's privacy, I said. By taking necessary precautions in a dangerous world. The rain was getting heavier outside, drumming against the soundproof windows. I thought about all the cases Chang and I had worked, all the criminals we'd caught, all the evidence that had seemed to appear at exactly the right moment. How many of our successes had been because we were good detectives, and how many had been because the surveillance network was feeding us information. What happens if we refuse? Chang asked. Williams's expression didn't change. Then you'll be transferred to desk jobs while Internal Affairs investigates allegations of evidence tampering and procedural violations. Careers tend not to survive those kinds of investigations. He showed us fabricated evidence, video footage of Chang and me appearing to plant evidence at crime scenes, recordings of us discussing illegal surveillance techniques, financial records suggesting we'd been taking bribes. All of this evidence will disappear if you agree to be part of the solution, Williams said. But if you choose to be part of the problem, it will be discovered during routine internal affairs audits. Chang looked at me, and I saw the same calculation in her eyes that I was making. Refuse to cooperate, and our careers would be destroyed while the surveillance network continued operating. Agree to cooperate, and we'd become part of the system we'd sworn to oppose. But what Williams said next changed everything. Of course, there is a third option, he said quietly. Detective Chang, your sister works for the district attorney's office, doesn't she? Very promising career. It would be unfortunate if she became involved in an investigation that could damage her professional prospects. The threat was clear. Cooperate, or our families would be targeted. That's when I made a decision that would either save us or get us killed. We need time to think about this, I said. Williams nodded. You have until tomorrow morning. After that, we'll need to assume you've chosen to be part of the problem. But as we left his office, Chang whispered something that gave me hope. Jake, remember when we found Wells's apartment? The surveillance equipment they removed? What about it? They missed something. The USB drive behind the mirror wasn't the only copy Wells made. Chang had been more observant than I'd realized. While I was focused on the surveillance holes in the walls, she noticed something else. A small device hidden inside the apartment's smoke detector. Wells was running her own surveillance operation, Chang explained. She was recording everyone who entered her apartment, including whoever took her evidence. We had footage of the people who'd kidnapped Amanda Wells. Professional operatives, government vehicles, federal credentials. Evidence of a conspiracy that went far beyond local law enforcement corruption. But what we didn't know was that Wells had been running an even more sophisticated operation than any of us had imagined. And what she discovered would expose not just the surveillance network, but the federal agencies that were funding it. Have you ever felt like you were being watched at work? Do you think your phone calls and internet activity are really private? What would you do if you discovered that the people sworn to protect you were actually monitoring your every move? I'm Officer Carlos Martinez, the same K-9 handler whose story you heard earlier. What I'm about to tell you happened 5 days after Detective Morrison and Chan discovered Amanda Wells's hidden surveillance footage. It's the story of how Rex, my compromised partner, led me into the sewers beneath our city and helped us finally expose the surveillance network that had been destroying lives for 15 years. But first, I need to explain what happened after Sergeant Williams gave me that 24-hour ultimatum. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in my kitchen with Rex, trying to figure out how to protect my partner while stopping the people who had corrupted his training. That's when I noticed something I'd missed before. Rex kept looking toward the basement door. Not the normal curiosity a dog shows when he hears a noise. This was his alert behavior, the same focused attention he'd shown at all those surveillance houses. But we were in my own home, and I'd never installed any electronic equipment in my basement. I followed Rex downstairs, and that's when I found it. Hidden behind my water heater was a device I'd never seen before. Professional-grade surveillance equipment, recording everything that happened in my house. The timestamp showed it had been installed 6 months ago, the same time Rex's special training had begun. They hadn't just been using my dog to find surveillance equipment. They'd been using him to install it. Rex had been trained to alert to specific electronic signatures, then lead handlers to those locations so they could be upgraded with newer surveillance technology. My own basement had been one of his training targets. But Rex's training had one flaw that would ultimately bring down the entire network. See, dogs don't understand human corruption. To Rex, alerting to surveillance equipment was just a job that earned him treats and praise. He didn't know the difference between finding equipment to remove it or finding equipment to install it. And he didn't know the difference between official police operations and criminal conspiracies. So when Rex started alerting to electronic signatures coming from underground, from the city's storm drain system, he was just doing what he'd been trained to do. The alert started during our regular patrol on Thursday morning. We were driving through downtown when Rex became agitated, whining and scratching at the patrol car window. His attention was focused on a storm drain grate at the intersection of 5th and Main. I stopped the car and let Rex investigate. He immediately went into full alert mode at the drain opening, indicating a strong electronic signature coming from below ground. "What V you got, buddy?" I asked, but Rex just kept staring down into the darkness. I called it into dispatch, reporting a possible drug investigation requiring K-9 follow-up. But what I found in those tunnels wasn't drugs. It was the nerve center of the entire surveillance operation. The storm drain system had been modified with climate-controlled chambers, fiber optic cables, and server rooms that housed the central monitoring equipment for the entire city. Miles of tunnels filled with surveillance technology that would make the NSA jealous. Rex led me through a maze of passages that seemed to have been professionally constructed. Not the rough modifications you'd expect from criminals, but engineered installations with proper ventilation, lighting, and security systems. This has been here for years, I realized, following Rex deeper into the underground network. We found monitoring stations showing live feeds from hundreds of locations throughout the city. Police stations, courthouses, government buildings, private homes, businesses, every location that had been upgraded with surveillance equipment was being monitored from these underground facilities. But what made me understand the true scope of the operation was finding the personnel files stored in the underground offices. Detailed psychological profiles on thousands of people. Police officers, judges, prosecutors, city officials, business owners, journalists, anyone who could potentially threaten the surveillance network's operations. Each file contained blackmail material, financial vulnerabilities, family information, and recruitment strategies. My own file was there, along with Rex's training records. They'd been monitoring me for 2 years before approaching me with their ultimatum. They knew about my divorce, my financial struggles, my relationship with Rex, and exactly how to manipulate me into cooperation. But Rex had led me to something even more disturbing. In the deepest part of the tunnel system, we found living quarters. Not temporary spaces, but permanent residential areas with beds, kitchens, and personal belongings. People were living down here, full-time, monitoring the surveillance network. "Detective Santos," I called out when I saw a familiar figure working at one of the monitoring stations. She turned around, and I could see the relief in her eyes. "Martinez. Thank God. I was hoping someone would find us." "Us?" Santos gestured to other figures working in the shadows. "Amanda Wells, the federal prosecutor. 3 FBI agents who were investigating the network. 2 journalists who got too close to the story. We've all been relocated down here for our own protection." "Protection from what?" "From the people running this operation. Martinez, this surveillance network isn't just about local corruption. It's a federal intelligence program that went rogue." Santos explained what she'd learned during her 3 months underground. The surveillance network had started as a legitimate anti-terrorism initiative after September 11. Federal funding, legal authority, cooperation from local law enforcement. But over time, the people running the program had realized they could use the surveillance infrastructure for personal gain. "They started with terrorists and drug dealers," Santos said. "But once you have the ability to monitor anyone, anywhere, anytime, the temptation to use that power grows. Soon they were watching judges to predict court decisions, monitoring prosecutors to control criminal cases, surveilling police officers to ensure compliance." Amanda Wells joined us, carrying files that contained the complete financial records of the operation. "They're making millions from selling surveillance data to private interests. Corporate espionage, political intelligence, personal blackmail. They've turned domestic surveillance into a profit center." But what Wells had discovered went even deeper than financial corruption. "The surveillance network has been manipulating elections," she said. "They monitor voting patterns, influence local media coverage, and blackmail or eliminate candidates who threaten their operations." She showed me records of political campaigns that had been sabotaged, candidates whose personal lives had been destroyed by leaked surveillance data, and election results that had been influenced by strategically timed scandals. "They've been controlling local government for 15 years," Wells continued. "Every mayor, every city council member, every county commissioner, they either work for the surveillance network or they get destroyed by it." That's when I understood why Rex had been so important to their operation. Dogs can't be bribed, blackmailed, or corrupted. They just follow their training. Rex was the perfect tool for finding and compromising surveillance targets because he couldn't be turned against his handlers the way human operatives could. But Rex's loyalty worked both ways. While we were discovering the scope of the underground operation, Rex was exploring the tunnels on his own. And what he found changed everything. Rex came running back to us, agitated and focused on a particular direction. His alert behavior was more intense than I'd ever seen it. "He's found something big," I told Santos. We followed Rex through a series of passages that led to what looked like a command bunker. Multiple screens showing satellite feeds, communication equipment connected to federal networks, and files marked with classification levels I'd never seen before. This wasn't just a surveillance operation. It was an intelligence hub with connections to federal agencies, foreign governments, and private intelligence contractors. "Martinez," Santos said, staring at one of the screens. "Look at this." The monitor showed a live feed from inside the White House Situation Room. Real-time surveillance of federal government meetings, classified intelligence briefings, and national security discussions. "They're watching everything," I said. Amanda Wells was reviewing files from a secure terminal. Not just watching. Influencing. Look at these communication logs. They've been feeding intelligence to federal agencies, foreign governments, and private corporations. They know about military operations before they happen, economic policies before they're announced, and diplomatic initiatives before they're implemented. The surveillance network hadn't just gone rogue. It had become a shadow intelligence agency operating without oversight, accountability, or legal authority. But what Rex found next would give us the evidence we needed to bring down the entire operation. Hidden behind a false wall was a storage room containing physical evidence of the network's crimes. Financial records, communication logs, video footage, and audio recordings documenting 15 years of surveillance, blackmail, and corruption. "This is everything," Wells said, reviewing the files. "Every crime, every victim, every transaction. Enough evidence to prosecute hundreds of people and expose the entire network." But Santos looked worried. "Martinez, if we try to take this evidence to the surface, they'll know immediately. The entire tunnel system is monitored. They'll see us coming and destroy everything before we can get help." That's when I realized Rex had one more surprise for us. Throughout his training, Rex had been taught to identify specific electronic signatures. But dogs have better hearing than humans, and Rex had been picking up on communication frequencies that the surveillance network used to coordinate their operations. Rex led us to a communication hub where we could monitor the network's radio traffic. And what we heard made us realize we had less time than we'd thought. "Underground breach in Sector 7, came a voice over the radio. "Unauthorized personnel in the main server room. Initiate lockdown protocol. They know we're here," I said. Santos was already moving. "We need to get this evidence to the surface before they can destroy it." But Wells had a better idea. "Martinez, does Rex know how to get back to the original entrance?" "Of course." "Why?" "Because we're not just taking evidence to the surface. We're taking the entire underground facility." Wells explained her plan. The tunnel system was connected to the city's main infrastructure: power, communications, and water systems. If we could access the central control room, we could broadcast the evidence directly to news outlets, federal agencies, and law enforcement departments across the country. "Instead of hoping someone believes us," Wells said, "we'll give them live footage of the surveillance network in operation." Rex led us through the tunnels toward the central control room, but we could hear pursuit behind us. Security teams were moving through the underground facility, trying to intercept us before we could reach the broadcast equipment. The tunnels were designed like a maze, but Rex's training worked in our favor. He could navigate by following electronic signatures, leading us directly to our target while avoiding the security teams. But when we reached the central control room, we found we weren't the first people to think of broadcasting the evidence. Detectives Morrison and Chang were already there, along with Officer Martinez's K-9 partner and several other police officers I didn't recognize. "Santos," Chang called out. "We've been trying to reach you for hours." Morrison was working at a computer terminal. "We got your message about the underground facility. We've been broadcasting evidence for the past 30 minutes. That's when I realized the scope of what was happening above ground. The evidence we'd found in the tunnels was being broadcast live to news outlets across the country. Federal investigators were already en route to arrest the surveillance network's leadership. Police departments in dozens of cities were conducting simultaneous raids on surveillance facilities. "It's over," Santos said. "The whole network is being shut down." But our escape from the tunnels was just the beginning of a much larger investigation. Over the next 6 months, the evidence we'd found underground led to the prosecution of over 200 people involved in the surveillance network. Federal agents, local police officers, judges, prosecutors, and private contractors all faced charges ranging from conspiracy to treason. The surveillance equipment was dismantled, the underground facilities were sealed, and new oversight procedures were put in place to prevent similar operations from developing in the future. Rex was retrained to work only on legitimate drug detection cases, and his service record was cleared of any mention of his involvement in the surveillance operations. But the psychological impact of what we'd discovered continues to affect everyone involved. Knowing that we'd been watched, monitored, and manipulated for years changed how we view privacy, technology, and institutional authority. The most disturbing realization was how many people had been complicit in the surveillance network without understanding its true scope. Officers like me, judges like Morrison's father, prosecutors like Wells, good people who thought they were protecting public safety while actually enabling a criminal conspiracy. The rain that night seemed to wash away more than just the physical evidence of corruption. It felt like a cleansing of the entire system that had been compromised for so long. But what bothers me most is knowing how long the surveillance network operated without detection. 15 years of monitoring innocent people, corrupting public officials, and manipulating democratic institutions. How many other networks like this exist? How many other cities have underground surveillance facilities? How many other K-9 officers have unknowingly helped compromise the privacy of the people they're supposed to protect? Rex doesn't understand the significance of what he helped uncover. To him, it was just another day of following his training and earning treats for good work. But his loyalty and training, even when corrupted by criminal conspiracies, ultimately helped expose the truth. The tunnel system has been sealed, but I still think about all those people living underground, monitoring our lives without our knowledge. I think about the judges who made decisions based on blackmail, the prosecutors who threw cases to protect the network, and the police officers who unknowingly helped violate the privacy of innocent citizens. Most of all, I think about trust. How do we trust institutions when we know they can be compromised? How do we trust technology when we know it can be used against us? How do we trust our colleagues when we know some of them might be reporting our activities to people with hidden agendas? The surveillance network is gone, but the questions it raised about privacy, authority, and institutional corruption remain. In an age where technology makes surveillance easier and more pervasive, how do we protect ourselves from the people who are supposed to protect us? Have you ever wondered who might be watching you through your devices? Do you think your local police department could be involved in surveillance operations you don't know about? What would you do if you discovered that your most trusted institutions were actually monitoring and manipulating your life? Because after everything I've seen, I know one thing for certain. The price of freedom is constant vigilance, not just against foreign enemies, but against the corruption of the very systems we depend on to keep us safe. Thanks so much for watching. I can't express enough how much your support means. The likes, the comments, it all really helps the channel grow. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. I always take the time to read them. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss out on any new videos. See you next time.